Hello, my friends, and happy Friday! Today is March the 26th, and this is the 38th edition of Book Fun Friday. As always, welcome. I am so happy you're here. So, I mentioned last Friday that today's book talk would be a true crime story, and that story is titled The Borden Murders, the Lizzie Borden and the Trial of the Century, and it's written by the author Sarah Miller. So I don't want to make assumptions and think anybody watching this knows all about the Lizzie Borden case. So let me fill you in on some details about what happened. So back in August of 1892 in Fall River, Massachusetts, there was this horrific murder. This couple, Andrew and Abby Borden, were hacked to death with a hatchet, multiple blows that killed each of them in their home. And it was pretty quickly determined that suspect number one was their daughter. It was actually Andrew's daughter and Abby's stepdaughter, Lizzie Borden. And the reason that Lizzie was suspected was she was in the house or on the property near the house at the times that both of the murders occurred. It was determined that Abby was killed first, and then about an hour and a half later, Andrew was killed in their homes. And since Lizzie was there at the time, either in a different part of the house or on the property, the police very quickly zeroed in on her and considered her suspect number one. And because she was considered a suspect then, she was arrested, she was put on trial. She was eventually acquitted. She was found not guilty of committing the crimes. But unfortunately, that followed her the rest of her life. It hung sort of like a cloud over her head the rest of her life. She was considered the person who got away with killing her father and her stepmom. The crazy thing about, or one of the crazy things about this story is that when the police showed up at her home, when the crime was reported and the police came, there was no evidence on her. Now, I mentioned that her father and her stepmother were hacked to death by a hatchet. And so you would think that there would have been blood on her somewhere, in her hair, on her face, on her clothing, her hands. Some evidence would have connected her to the crimes, and there was no evidence. Nothing was found on her person at all. There were no marks on her. If she were murdering someone, an adult person with an axe, you would think that that person would have fought back, so maybe she would have had bruises on her, scratches on her. None of that was found. There was literally no evidence found on her person to connect her to the crime. But because she was there, and there was some speculation that she had a bad relationship with her stepmother and maybe some resentment toward her father. This was all speculation, that she just snapped that day in August and committed this horrible crime and killed them both. I mentioned that this happened in 1892. We're deep into the 21st century, and we're still talking about this crime of the century, probably because it was never solved. Just because she was found not guilty at trial doesn't mean that she was considered innocent of this crime. You know, there's a difference between those two. And so all these years later, this unsolved murder, if you will, is still hanging out there for people to talk about, write about, create YA books about, and try to, figure today, maybe by today's standards we could have solved this crime. Who knows? But it's obviously still a topic of interest. I also want to put a plug in about this book to anybody watching or connected to somebody who teaches a law and justice or criminal justice class at the high school level or even the college level. This would be an awesome book study to do with that class. I could see students digging into this story. There's terminology there that's accessible, but it's specific to court cases and legal proceedings and forensics. This book helps you understand the role of the prosecutor, the defense attorney, the judge, what happens in jail, how prisoners were treated in 1892 in jail, how women prisoners were treated. I mean, there's so much in here. I could see a book study being done in a law and justice or criminal justice class, taking this apart. Students could maybe try to solve it themselves, maybe have a mock trial. There's a rich vein to mine here, if you will. So it's not just a great YA book to read or true crime story to read. This could actually be applied to specific curriculum as well. So I find that really cool. So I'm going to share a couple passages like I always do. Now this is in the very first part of the book, and I'm guessing that some of you at least will recognize this little poem that's contained in this part. It happened every spring in Fall River, Massachusetts. Behind the curtained windows of the stately house she shared with her sister on French Street, Miss Lizzie Borden heard the children skipping rope on the sidewalk, chanting a rhyme to the once popular tune of Ta-ra-ra-boom-de-ay. Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Year after year, she listened to them butcher her family's tragic past. A new century had dawned since the brutal hatchet murders of Miss Lizbeth's father and stepmother captured the nation's attention. She had altered her name from Lizzie to Lizbeth and left the family home on 2nd Street, where the terrible deed was done, and still the ditty followed her. Most of Lizbeth's well-bred neighbors up on Fall River's posh hill refused to speak about the Borden slangs, let alone the fact that the Borden's own daughter, Miss Lizbeth herself, had been accused of them. And yet their children never failed to learn that rhyme. The youngsters singing it now had not even been alive on August 4th, 1892, but that didn't stop them from contributing new verses. Andrew Borden now is dead. Lizzie hit him on the head. Up in heaven he will sing, on the gallows she will swing. Miss Lizbeth's sensational murder trial, the jury's momentous decision, the time she spent behind bars, none of that mattered. In the decades that followed, the citizens of Fall River, young and old, enacted their own sentence upon her. The members of the Central Congregational Church, where Miss Lizbeth had been a member of the Christian Endeavor Society and taught immigrants at the Central Mission Sunday School, publicly shunned her. Friends, even those who had testified to her innocence, quietly broke away. Over the years, mischievous children trampled her lawn and lobbed rotting eggs at the sides of her home. Handfuls of sand and gravel rained upon her window panes. They tied her doorknobs and stuck pins in her doorbell to make it ring non-stop. At least they did not chant their jump rope rhyme to her face when she answered the bell. Instead, they called her vile names before dashing from her porch. Gawkers in Oak Grove Cemetery, adults no less, rubbernecked at the sight of Miss Lizbeth Borden, come to tend to the graves of her supposed victims. Miss Borden, don't pay any attention to them, Terence Lomax, the grounds foreman, often told her, as he accompanied her to the plot where her parents lay alongside the baby sister she had never known. Certainly Miss Lizbeth was grateful for Terence and the discreet handful of others who were kind and respectful to her in spite of her past. Everyone had heard the rumors about her beheading troublesome kittens and baby birds, but only a few knew of the tender notes and thoughtful gifts she dispensed. People like the coal delivery man who always found a slice of chocolate cake waiting inside Miss Lizbeth's basement. Or the sick little girl who received a pretty painted bowl full of gumdrops with a $5 bill hidden at the bottom. There was little that Miss Lizbeth treasured above loyalty, and contrary to her public image, she delighted in doting upon those, like Terence, who graced her later years with companionship. But did Miss Lizbeth realize that even Terence, the sympathetic groundskeeper who made sure the paths to the Borden family plot were cleared in winter and was too polite to accept her persistent attempts to tip him, had gone to witness the spectacle of her trial as a young man? In the same way, the children chanting outside her windows marked the arrival of spring for Miss Lizbeth. The newspaper headlines heralded summer's peak. Every August, the Fall River Daily Globe observed the anniversary of Andrew and Abby Borden's deaths by printing another front-page tirade against the incarnate fiend in human form who rained cruel, vengeful, bloody blow after blow upon Andrew Borden's venerable head. Always, the Globe was at pains to remind the citizenry that the man or woman who had committed the crime still wandered among them. There was no need to print a name. Every man, woman, and child in Fall River knew perfectly well who the Globe's pointing finger accused. Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks, and when she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Today, everything most people know of Lizzie Andrew Borden is contained in those 4 lines, and nearly everything in those 4 lines is wrong. So I have another passage to share. This is toward the end of the book. On June 1st, 1927, Lizzie Borden died at Maplecroft. That was the home she moved to after the murders. No one, not even her friends, was sorry to see her go. Life, said one of her nearest and dearest, had become a burden to her. Those who knew Lizzie Borden best were very glad that it had come to an end, and knew that she was glad too. Only a select few had known she was dying. Only the presence of the undertaker's automobile in the drive indicated that it had happened. To most of Fall River, the news came out of nowhere, but Lizzie's friends had noticed her health faltering for the last 2 years. The final decline was sharp and swift. 6 days, and it was over. Years ago, the papers had accused her of having no heart at all, but in the end, it was her heart that gave out. The death certificate read myocarditis. She was 66 years old. Her funeral, as she had specified, was strictly private. Neither the undertaker nor the cemetery would release any information, ensuring that in death, at least, Lizzie Borden would not be hounded by the press or the public. Miss Vida Turner, who was summoned to Maplecroft at noon on Saturday, June 4th, to sing the single hymn Lizzie had requested, recalled, "The undertaker unlocked the door, let me in, and locked the door immediately. I was ushered into a room. I sang the song, and then I was ushered out. The undertaker told me, 'Go straight home and don't tell anyone where you have been.'" The papers made it sound as though Lizzie had no friends, no one but her servants to tend her very last hours and carry her casket to the grave. They did not know that at the close of the ceremony, cards were removed from the wreaths and baskets of flowers to keep her friends' names from being exposed to the public. By her own request, Lizzie Borden was buried at her father's feet. And again, this is a true crime story, and it's titled The Borden Murders, Lizzie Borden and the Trial of the Century, and it's written by the author, Sarah Miller. Well, guys, thank you as always for watching. I do appreciate you. We're heading now into year 2 of Book Fun Friday, so thank you for that too. Continue taking care of yourselves, and I will see you next Friday. Bye.